Okay, I'm going to go through sort of like a basic to intermediate and then move on to more advanced sort of tower defense sort of tutorial. This works for any tower defense game. I'm using Sanctum here because one, it's a game I enjoy. Two, it's a very good for demonstration purposes. And three, it's very, very simple and a lot of fun. And you can play it with friends. So I'm going to load into a game. And I am going to basically give myself a lot of money. So, in any tower defense game, you won't have weapons because this is like a Sanctum thing, but you'll have a list of towers to choose from. Some games start you off with basically every tower and you can just place them down. Others you have to choose sort of your loadout. I'm going to go with this loadout here because it is very specific and very basic to what I'm going to be showing you. So, normally when you play a tower defense game, you'll see a grid of boxes, and this is where you place your towers. Now, Sanctum's case, you have to place a block tower first, and then the tower on top. Some games let you just place a tower outright, but I'm going to be showing you basically how to basically play these games in the most optimal way. So before you start anything, you need to look at what's coming. Sanctum, you can basically hit escape and you can see basically what each wave is going to bring. So you have basically a description or sort of a bestiary of enemies. Some games have a little thing down the bottom that says like, oh, hey, this wave is coming. Some more simple games will just tell you like the type of enemy, whether they're fast, whether they have a lot of health. Especially like the desktop tower defense games, the little flash ones that are very simplified. You need to do this quickly sometimes because some games are on a timer. They're on a rail system where basically what will happen is that the game will play itself. It will just keep going, keep sending waves. In Sanctum's case, I have to press enter to start the wave, which I'm not going to do because I don't have a defense. So the main sort of gist of tower defense games is that enemies will come from 1, 2, or 3, or however many paths. You can see these paths are marked with dotted lines in Sanctum. And these will come towards a central point. Or it could be 2 points. You never know. So this is what you're aiming to protect at the end of the day. It's the core, the nexus, whatever you want to call it. This normally has a set amount of health. There are some games where once one enemy hits it, it's game over. That's sort of like a hardcore tower defense. But those are very, very uncommon. So, the first thing you want to do is you want to start building your defenses. You want to make sure that the enemies take the longest route possible to the core. Now, what some people might do is if I start building here, they might just basically add a load of towers that just attack on the way to the core. And if I start the wave, you can see that this is horribly inefficient. So I haven't put any defenses here for this lane or this lane, but this lane will see why it's horribly efficient to do what I just did and basically just like a line of towers. Sanctum is a special case because you have guns that you can shoot, but most of basically all tower defense games you won't have that. So the enemies come in, and okay, these guys are going to make it to the core, but these guys are going to get shot. And as you can see, they just get shot and they run. They're just going to keep running. They don't care. Because they have one goal in mind, and that is to the core. They're not going to just stand around and like try and fight back against the towers. No, they will actually actively just seek the core, nothing else. Yeah, as you can see, I basically lost this. That was very, very bad. So, let me restart the level here. So what you want to do is you want to make the longest route sort of possible for them. This can be done in a variety of ways. I'll show 2 example patterns for this map in particular. This is a very basic map. Some maps will be more complicated. But what you can do is you can make sort of like an S design. So if I do this and block off this entire sort of front row here, notice how the enemies will now go round and then round to here. What you can then do is then you can go behind that and make sort of an S pattern or like a snake pattern. So now they have to go down through here and then to the core. And if I basically repeat that, their path towards the core gets longer and longer, and you want to make this path as long as possible. Now, another thing you can do is you can basically do it, instead of going up and down, you can actually do it side to side here. So I'll show you an example of that. So if I basically line this back wall, and then if I go and do this, basically make a sort of like snaking pattern. If I press tab now, you can see that I've made their path significantly longer. So you can either do up and down like this, or you can do side to side like this. It's completely up to you. Both are valid, basically. You can also get wacky with it and make sort of like a spiral. So you can go, if I restart, just so I don't have to like sell all these towers individually. You can also make kind of like a spiral pattern where they all converge in the middle and then they go outward. So if I quickly demonstrate that, you'll start by building, of course, across to make sure they're only going one way. Then I want to block off this back wall here. And then what you want to do is basically spiral around. So I haven't made the best example here, but basically make it so they spiral around, then they double back, and then they go towards the core. I don't have enough space to do this on this map here. I thought I did, so that's my bad. But that will also work. So I'm going to quickly just make a very basic thing here. So I'm going to place down what's known as a televator, so just so I've got easy access to the top here. Again, that's like a sanctum only thing. So I'm going to continue building. And I'm going to basically make it so they can't. They have to take the longest route possible. So again, I'm going to quickly. Also, another good thing, you want to make these corridors, you don't want to make them too long, but you also, again, want to make them, obviously, long enough. What I mean by that, so think of it as, like, you want the towers to hit them multiple times. So towers have a limited range, and you want to basically make those towers hit the enemies as much as possible, because you're defenseless. Like, it's not like you can like just click on them and like zap them with like a laser pistol or something like that. Well, in Sanctum's case, you can, because they have weapons, but that's besides the point. That's the exception, not the rule. So you want to make sure these towers hit these enemies as much as possible. So with this design is actually very good, because not only are going to, so say if I place a tower right here, so this is a basic like sort of Gatling tower. Not only is that Gatling tower going to hit them as they pass here, but it's also going to hit them when they pass through here as well. So you want to make it so you have as much opportunity as possible for those towers to hit enemies. So I'm going to make a sort of more refined example of what I showed earlier, where I just basically did a line of towers. And we'll see how that fares now that we have a longer sort of system. So now these enemies will be funneled into one row and they'll be hit by all these towers. But then they'll also won't be able to go directly to the core. They'll have to go round here, round here, round here, and then to the core. And this gives these towers more opportunities to shoot. So we've got slightly different enemies this time, but it proves my point. These will be basically a good example to show that the towers are hitting more. They won't fully kill them, but they will do more damage than if you basically did a straight line to the core. And the reason why these aren't killing them is because I'm on a special mode where you basically build your entire defense first. I'm just going to clear these guys out. I don't think I can. But I'm basically on a special mode just because I have unlimited money. Well, I say unlimited, but I have a lot of money to start with. This mode is basically where you build your defense and then you see how many waves you survive. But it's a good way to have a lot of money off the get-go just for sort of explaining things. So that's the basics of pathing. You can get way more wacky. And if I load into another map, I'll give you a better example. So this map is more complicated. You don't have a set grid. However, you can still take into account the principles that I showed you earlier. So again, slightly simpler where the enemies are coming from one direction. But you can still take, like I said, you can still take into account what I said previously. So start off by basically making as much of a long route as possible. I'm going to block this off so they can't go up here. And you basically want to snake them around and basically waste their time. So you see how I've made it so they go around here, around here, around here, and then they're just going to go straight to the core. We can block that off and make them go... and make them go around and up here. We can also go up there and block that off, making them go all the way around here. What you can also do is scrap all that entirely. If you sell these two, another clever thing you can do is make them go up here. Now, some tower defense games won't let you do this because the enemies are automatically going to find the path of less resistance. But if you place your towers right, what you can then do is you can make the AI go on a long route as possible. So now they go all the way up here and then go back, which is pretty cool. So that's sort of that sort of like wraps up pathing, really. I don't know what else to describe. There's going to be situations where you have a lot more complicated maps. So, for example, Arc here. This is a pretty complicated map. I'll quickly load into that one. So, in this map, the enemies are coming from 2 locations. And you have a similar grid, but you can get more creative with it. So, you can basically... do that spiral thing that I mentioned earlier. Have them spiral round. And basically sort of... you could build this twice, actually, since you have a equal sort of space. Do you have a... Yeah, so you have two squares, one here and one here. So you could basically make 2 different sort of pathways. Or you can make the same pathway and have them like meet up in the middle, if that makes sense. But let's go on about how towers work. So in most tower defense games, towers can be placed down like this, and there are different types. So there are some types which shoot ground enemies, there's some types which shoot air enemies, some that do both. Depending on the tower defense game, some towers may have special abilities. So for example, one can only shoot lasers from far away but not up close. Some will only shoot a certain type of enemy, so you need to take that into account. Sanctum has a pretty cool tower called the Slow Field, which basically isn't really a tower, but it basically slows enemies down, which is pretty cool. Most, if not all, towers in any tower defense game can be upgraded. So I'm going to place a Gatling tower here. This is basically just a bog standard like machine gun sort of tower. So upgrading basically makes your tower a lot stronger. What you can do with upgraded towers is basically have a line of upgraded towers which will do significantly more damage than a level 1 tower, for example, like a non-upgraded tower. So I'm going to place down 5 of these towers. I'm going to show you the difference between all of them. So I'm going to upgrade this one. So you can see on my little like tooltip down here, you can see every level of the tower. So you have 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. Some games you can upgrade towers infinitely. I'm pretty sure the maximum for Sanctum is 5 or 6. It might be 6. Yeah, it's 6. Okay. So I'm going to quickly sell this one just so I can do this a little bit better. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So I have all 6 towers doing their thing. Get rid of this one here. This here. So if I look at basically every single tower, I can hover over it and it will tell me the amount of damage, how fast it will fire, the range, and the spread. Spread is basically a Sanctum specific thing, basically. The higher the spread, the less accurate it will be. But most towers will have a damage rate, or a damage per second, and a range. And as you can see, if I hover over these towers, their radius will get slightly larger and larger. Obviously, the highest level tower has the highest radius. You also see that they do more damage. So this one here does 4 damage. This one does 8, 13, 21, 39, and 80. The upgrades get more expensive as you go on, but normally they compensate with that by higher power jumps. So for example, this one only goes from 4 to 8, whereas the level 5 to level 6 goes from 39 to 80. And obviously that costs a lot more. So yeah. Normally the cost of upgrading a tower doubles, but this isn't true in all games. Also go over the shots per second as well, or the basically damage per second. So you got 9, 11.11, 12.5, 14.2, 16.6, and again 16.6. So it's a small increment up. I think this is like a sort of like a limitation on the game. But some tower defense games, they cap out their damage per second, or the shots per second at a certain value. So for example, you can see that level 5 and level 6 both have 16.6. I think that's like a technical limitation. I'm not too sure on that. But yeah. We'll go over the range as well. So we've got 3.9 to 4.0, 4.8 to 4.1, 4.42, 4.3, 4.4, etc, etc. Range depends entirely on the tower, and obviously if you upgrade it, you get more. Some towers, for example, the scatter laser, have a much larger range. So as you can see, this is 4.2, whereas we only got 4.4 with this one. 4.2 would have to get a level 4 tower on the Gatling, whereas this one can basically go pretty high. So it depends all on the tower. So as you can see, this one is way bigger than this circle here. So it all depends on the tower, basically. So we got the Gatling tower here, which is basically your bog standard one. We have this one here, which is an accelerator. The accelerator is a pretty cool tower in this game, which basically increases the rate of fire over time. So you, again, there's another like sort of special case there. And because it increases the rate of fire over time, no matter how much you upgrade it, I don't know if you saw that, but no matter how much you upgrade it, the shots per second will stay the same. So some towers have different caveats compared to others. You just have to experiment. You have to look into each of the stats of the towers and basically figure out what is going to be the best for the current situation. Again, you can see what is coming by looking at all these waves here. So obviously, say if you have a flying enemy, these ground towers aren't going to do basically fuck all. You'd have to build some kind of anti-air sort of tower here. Or some towers in some games cover both. So for example, in Sanctum, you have something called the scatter laser, which targets both air and ground. Now, this might sound good on paper, but I'm going to go into why that isn't in just a second. We're going to go over selling towers. So selling towers is pretty basic. Say if you need to move a tower or you need to replace a tower, well, normally you can't just replace them just on the spot. You'd have to sell them. Now, the problem with selling is that you don't get all of your money back from selling. So, for example, say if I built a bog standard Gatling tower, boom, it costs 10 to build, but then it costs 8 to sell. So you're not getting all of your money back. Normally it's 75% of the cost of the tower. Sometimes it's half, so for example I could only get like 5 back, and obviously this scales when you upgrade. Obviously if I sell a max level tower, I'm not going to get like 5 back, because that would be ridiculous. So selling towers is kind of important. You may need to adapt your basic tower placement, or you may need to swap some towers out for ones better suited to the job. For example, swapping out air towers to ground towers. But normally your defense should hold up if you diversify your tower variety. So for example, having Gatling towers here, then like anti-air here, etc, etc. So that's the basics of like selling towers. Sanctum 1 does not have this, but Sanctum 2 has something called target priority. So target priority is basically you can tell a tower what to attack. So these towers here, they're pretty dumb, okay? These towers will basically attack any old random enemy. However, sometimes you may not want that. Sometimes you want the tower to target, for example, the highest health enemy. And this is especially useful for certain situations. I'm not going to go into too much detail on these certain situations, but they should be pretty self-explanatory. So normally you can set towers to target like the highest HP enemy or the lowest HP enemy. For example, you maybe want to target like the lowest HP enemies nearer towards the core, because obviously you're going to have your upgraded frontline defense here, and obviously your weaker towers here. So you want to get rid of those low HP enemies. Or maybe you want to do the opposite. You want to make it to the highest HP enemies, so that you'll basically only focus on those, and then they won't be able to get to the core so easily. It's up to you. There are multiple different targeting types apart from HP. You can do stuff like only target the closest enemy, or only target the enemy that's the furthest away, and obviously they have to be in this sort of range here. But yeah, So that's basically that's basically sort of target priority. It's not in this game; it's in the sequel. The sequel isn't as good as the first one, so that's my personal opinion. I just fell off the map. Whoops. But yeah, it's still a good game, but I just prefer the first one. Again, you can play this with friends as well. Speaking of friends, some tower defense games are multiplayer. This is a detriment and a curse, because what happens is normally in multiplayer games, you'll have increased enemy density to compensate for the additional players. Also, your cash pool will be split sometimes equally. Sometimes the host may get more money than the others. Sometimes after a wave, when you get paid, it might be dealt out based on who did the most damage or what towers are placed with one specific person. So say if I place, I don't know, this tower, say if I place a tower here, and then player B places a tower here. Depending on how many enemies that get zapped by this tower, and this tower corresponds to how much each player will get paid out. Some games work like that. Other games are just more basic and simple. Earlier in the video, I alluded to the fact that some towers are multi-purpose, and for example, the the scatter laser can target air and ground enemies. I said that this is more a curse than a blessing, and here is why. So, if you have a wave that has both air and ground enemies, the tower is going to basically, without it sort of prioritizing, or without you setting priority. So, for example, I went over priority earlier. Without you setting like a priority on basically what it shoots, it will just target literally anything. So you could have like one air enemy and like 10 ground enemies, and it could just target that one air enemy while the 10 ground could go and get to the core. This is also sort of relevant to like multiplayer, because you could split up your roles in a way. So one person could be in charge of one specific segment of the sort of grid here, and the other person could be so say if you had two players, for example, one person could be in charge of the defenses here, one could be here, and you want to basically coordinate and basically say, hey, I'm going to be doing some ground towers. Maybe you could do some air towers back here. I could do some air towers here. Maybe a few air ground towers. You want to basically try and synergize your defense as much as possible. If you're playing solo, this is not much of an issue, but especially when you're playing multiplayer, you just want to make sure that you know what you're doing, and you also want to make sure your friend knows what you're doing as well. Because if you basically go in with basically knowing everything, and then you have a person who's completely brand new to tower defense in general, it's going to be a rough time, and they're basically just going to build like a hodgepodge of towers everywhere. So if you do have a person, maybe run them through the basics. I've seen some people, here's some common mistakes, by the way. I've seen some people do shit like this. Like, this is not going to do anything. They're just going to go right past it. I've seen people make pretty patterns. Again, they look pretty when you're doing a top-down view, but it's not going to work. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I think that's basically it, really. Some games have an option to... if you're playing multiplayer, some games have an option to basically, I think I mentioned this earlier, but they call it like a turbo mode or like an auto mode. Normally when you're playing online that's enabled by default, as you can't really pause an online multiplayer game unless you're playing something like Sanctum, where everyone has to ready up in order for the next wave to come. So waves will be coming at you constantly. So you want to make sure you keep up the pace with you and your partner, or however many people you're playing with. So that's something you need to look out for. So let's actually start this wave, and we'll see how these towers do. So they're going to come from this side, and they're also going to come from up there. And you basically just want to make sure... Okay, these guys were just going to completely... Oh, no. They're all going to get hit. So here's a prime... ouch. So here's a prime example. So you see how this guy has less health than this guy? That's a prime example of how powerful upgraded towers can be. Just to sort of put that out there. And again, when you're playing multiplayer, what you could do is you could have someone in charge of just solely upgrading, someone in charge of building the main defense, and someone in charge of just towers. Obviously, Sanctum, you have to build the blocks and then the towers. Some games, you can just build towers outright. So, yeah. That's a good way to split up, because obviously, like I said earlier, some games will split your available resources, and you'd have to basically coordinate them. Voice chat is a must for stuff like this. God forbid if you played this game without communication, your defense would become like an utter mess, basically. That's basically about it, really. That's all I can think of the very basics. There are a lot of advanced stuff that I haven't delved into, but this should serve as like a basic to intermediate sort of level on how tower defense works. There are a lot of games out there which have their own unique mechanics, and obviously I can't show them off. There's some games where you have weapons like Sanctum, where you can like actively like shoot them as well as sort of use the towers to your advantage. There's some games with power-ups where you can like place like a, I don't know, say like a freeze bomb on the map which slows down enemies. Again, that's not correlated to just placing towers. That's like a whole separate thing. You've also got stuff like... Oh, I got an achievement. You've also got stuff like wave management. So wave management is a very sort of like niche thing, where basically some games will give you the option to choose, hey, which waves do you want to like go and fight? And you basically get a choice on how you want to do things. With that, I haven't seen too many games that do that, but it is an interesting concept. But yeah, you want to take into account basically everything I said here, and obviously pick the best option that your defense is most likely to hold up against. So for example, say if, I don't know, you had a choice between ground and air, and you picked air, but you only had ground towers, well then you're basically like screwed, because it's just going to fly over and just dive bomb the core. So yeah, wave management for games that do have it is pretty cool. But most games will just be on like a set track, and you will basically be able to see what is coming at all times. That just about covers everything. I think that is everything you need to know. Hopefully you're more well equipped to play these sorts of games, because they are pretty fun, especially with people. However, solo play is the way that I would personally recommend, just because you're not sharing resources. Some games I don't mind. Like, honestly, I don't really care. I would just prefer to have like my own resources just to build with. But it's a mixed bag. It depends who you're playing with, honestly. So that's basically it. Thank you for watching. If you want to play this game in particular, it's called Sanctum. It's very, very good. It basically is a tower defense and FPS hybrid. which is very, very unique. I haven't seen a lot of people do that. You got this game's sequel on Steam as well, Sanctum 2. Both made by Coffee Stain Studios, which is the same company that makes Satisfactory as well. So, you know, you're in good hands with that. One more thing before I go. Some games will have okay, well, maybe not this game, but some games will have 2 cores to defend. This basically makes it a whole lot harder. So be on the lookout for that. Some games won't let you place towers in certain locations as well. So also look out for that. So for example, this isn't like so much of an example. Okay, right here, I can't place a tower on this corner here. Perfect example, because there is snow covering it. I know, big whoop. But yeah, that's basically all you need to know about tower defense games. I think I've said that like twice now, but I keep thinking of like different things to say. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. And I hope you enjoyed this little like deep dive into how tower defense games work. If you want a more advanced tutorial, I can certainly make one. I would need to do a bit of research because there are very niche topics on certain games. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Share this around for anyone that is new, or someone who isn't new and might just want a refresher. You may learn a new thing or two from this tutorial. All right, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.